I felt as if I were walking with destiny, and that all my past life had been but a preparation for this hour and for this trial.
Country churchyard in Blaydon in the heart of England. Among these simple country people lie his ancestors, members of an illustrious family rooted deep in English soil and English history, the Churchills. For 10 campaigns in the 17th century, John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, commanded the armies of Europe against France. In Bavaria, he fought his greatest battle and most glorious victory. The hero lies here in a marble tomb in Blenheim Palace. Blenheim, named for the great victory, given to the Duke of Marlborough by a grateful nation, the ancestral home of the Churchill family, and one of the great houses of England. The trees themselves are marshaled in the formation of the Duke's infantry at that famous battle. Here in Blenheim Palace, generations later, lived a descendant of that first Duke, Lord Randolph Churchill. At the Cowes Regatta in 1873, he met Jenny Jerome, a beautiful American, fell in love with her and proposed, all within 48 hours.
I love her better than life itself. Her father is a gentleman who is obliged to live in New York to look after his business. I don't know what it is.
Mr. Jerome was a banker and the owner of the New York Times. They were married, and Lord Randolph brought his bride home.
As we passed the entrance archway and the lovely scenery burst upon me, Randolph said with pardonable pride, "This is the finest view in England." Looking at the lake, the bridge, the miles of magnificent park, and the huge, stately palace, I confess I felt awed. But my American pride forbade the admission.
She was 19, he was 23. Within the year, he was to launch his brilliant career in Parliament. And in the same year, 1874, on November 30th, there is a house party at Blenheim, followed by a ball. suddenly, young Lady Randolph is rushed through the palace. Her own room is upstairs, too far away. There's no time to reach it. And her child is born in a nearby bedroom, used that evening as a cloakroom. His name? Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill. Lady Randolph preserved his baby clothes, even locks of his hair. Winston was a lively boy, mischievous, full of high spirits, and happy, until that awful day when he is sent to school. He finds it a terrible experience, and he is a terrible student. At 13, he's sent to Harrow. How he got in remains to this day a mystery. All through his school days, he is at the bottom of the class. The brighter boys rush on to the study of Greek and Latin. Young Winston must remain behind with the study of the English language, which he came to love passionately and mastered thoroughly. As a little boy in Blenheim, wandering through the vast palace, Winston discovers a love for books and the way they are written, a love of history and the makers of history. Later on, he is to devour Macaulay and all Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. The rolling, eloquent prose is to influence his own forever.
History, with its flickering lamp, stumbles along the trail of the past, trying to reconstruct its scenes, to revive its echoes, and kindle with pale gleams the passion of former days.
A sense of history is bred in his bones. After all, he is a descendant of the great Duke of Marlborough. His ears ring with the thunder of the hero's guns, action, adventure, and great deeds. This is the life young Winston yearns for. At 18, he enters Sandhurst, the Royal Military Academy. A life of action, adventure, and daring is about to begin for him. Live dangerously is this young soldier's creed. And at 20, he hears his first gunfire in Cuba, where a little war is on. Also, he's introduced to expensive Havana cigars. His taste, he declares, has always been inclined to the best of things, and the best is none too good. 21 years old, he joins his regiment at Bangalore in India. Live dangerously. This is Imperial India. And here he learns polo, playing the game with all the dash and courage he is to bring to military skirmishes in the hills against local tribesmen. He records this experience in his first book, The Malacan Field Force, an immediate success. He then writes a novel, which he doesn't like and immediately urges his friends not to read. Now off to Egypt and the Sudan, Lieutenant Churchill is in the thick of the Battle of Omdurman.
Nothing in life is so exhilarating as to be shot at without result.
He writes a book about that campaign, too. Now Winston Churchill is correspondent for the Morning Post, traveling with the troops in South Africa to report on the Boer War. He is captured and makes a daring escape. but an insultingly modest reward is offered. Reaching safety, he finds himself a hero. Now, 25 years old, his destiny is to be fulfilled. He's elected a member of Parliament. He's to serve 6 sovereigns in their turn. The scholar who did so badly at school is to become one of the great parliamentarians of all time.
I am a child of the House of Commons. I was brought up in my father's house to believe in democracy. Trust the people. That was his message.
He enters politics just as socialism is emerging, the trade union movement, a time of change and turbulence. Already the turbulent young politician is known affectionately to his electors as Winnie. Winnie is a fierce and courageous fighter, and it takes courage to deal with those formidable women, the suffragettes. An outraged Churchill announces that he will not be henpecked into giving women the right to vote. 1908, he marries the beautiful Clementine Hosier. She is reported to have said that being married to him couldn't be easy, but I think it would be tremendously stimulating. Lady Churchill is able to say the same thing more than half a century later. January 1911, gunfire in Sydney Street, in London's East End. The Home Secretary, Winston Churchill, is told that a gang of anarchists has been trapped by the police. Always eager to be at the center of the storm, he rushes to Sydney Street, takes command, suggesting a frontal attack behind a sheet of metal, which would act as a shield. The leader of the opposition makes political capital of Winston's appearance on this unusual field of battle.
There are photographs of the Home Secretary in the danger zone. I understand what the photographer was doing there, but not the Home Secretary.
In the years to come, Sydney Street will twice hear the sound of battle. Age 36, Winston Churchill is made First Lord of the Admiralty.
I had at my disposal the finest tempered instrument of naval warfare. It had to face enormous duties rather than an antagonist.
Across the North Sea, the antagonist Kaiser Wilhelm prepares for war, and the naval race is on. The course is set. Collision is inevitable. Winston's imagination is fired by the appearance of a new weapon, air power. The Royal Flying Corps is established, and he promptly develops its naval wing, the Royal Naval Air Service. Winston himself develops a passion for flying. But whatever happens, he's determined that the fleet will be ready. The British Navy has been unchallenged for more than a century, but the new First Lord strengthens and modernizes it. Winston Churchill was born into a world which is about to disappear. Emperors and kings are to be swept away. But his concern is for the survival of one throne, England's. The roar of cannon foundries reaches a crescendo. British ships and naval establishments are waiting for battle orders. August the 4th, 1914, they received this message from the Admiralty. Commence hostilities against Germany. First World War begins. On land, the Germans sweep through Belgium and northern France, thrusting forward towards Paris. Then, the war of movement ends. Trenches are dug. Trenches from the North Sea to the Swiss frontier. In the deadly squalor of mud and rats, the hellish pattern of World War I is set behind barbed wire for 4 long years. Typically, the aggressive First Lord of the Admiralty is also busy with affairs outside his province. This war on land. He demands a machine that can cross trenches, and soon embryo land battleships make their appearance.
The actual conflict had to be more like one ruffian bashing the other on the snout with a club, a hammer, or something better.
Something better. The first crude tank is born. The German army pushes forward to the North Sea. Belgian troops retreat and take refuge in Antwerp. Surrender of the port appears imminent, but the British Navy is there. Armored cars and armored London buses operated by Marines. Another Churchillian idea. He himself arrives in Antwerp to rally the defenders. Allied troops fight on against impossible odds. 5 days later, the city falls. But the delay has saved other channel ports for the Allies, and their supply lines to the front are kept open. In the east, the ill-equipped Russian army is fighting for its life. In January 1915, the Tsar and the Imperial High Command send an urgent appeal to the French and British. Attack Turkey, Germany's ally. Open a new front. Shell the Turkish forces along the Dardanelles, says Churchill. Sail to Constantinople, and in one mighty thrust, force a route through to the Black Sea and relieve the exhausted Russians. There are heavy naval losses, and the authorities back home grow timid. But Churchill is adamant.
Take Constantinople. Take it by ships if you can. Take it by soldiers if you must. Take it whichever plan commends itself. But take it, and take it while time remains.
At last, the Allied troop convoys arrive. But there has been delay. The Turkish garrisons are strengthened. The soldiers land and move forward into a whirlwind of death. Winston Churchill calls for more men, for more ships. He's refused them.
A supreme enterprise was cast away. The light of victory was shining clearly before us, yet we could not get the strength, the power, and the driving force to follow it.
The Dardanelles campaign is a disaster. At home, public opinion is outraged and Churchill is blamed. 40 years old, he says, "I am finished." The First Lord of the Admiralty is dismissed. Always at the center of history, he's thrust aside, banished. His career in ruins, he prepares to go to France as a soldier.
And then it was that the muse of painting came to my rescue. Out of charity and out of chivalry, because after all she had nothing to do with me, and said, "Are these toys any good to you? They amuse some people."
As a major at the front, he paints one of his first pictures. a cruel image of modern war.
When the British people make up their minds to go to war, they expect to receive terrible injuries. That is why we try to remain at peace for as long as possible. The utility of war, even to the victor, may in most cases be an illusion. But war itself is not an illusion. Even a single bullet will be found real enough.
The war drags on during the summer and autumn of 1916. Stalemate on the Western Front. Tens of thousands die to gain a few yards of wasteland. Some of the maimed, some of the dying return home. A wavering and indecisive record sweeps the old government out of office. Lloyd George takes over. To be Minister of Munitions, a man of decision and vigor is needed. Winston Churchill is summoned back to the government.
We kept on doing our best. We kept on improving. We were told that we would run short of this or that, until the only thing we ran short of was Germans.
The new Minister of Munitions brings with him an old obsession. By now they call it Winston's Folly. Since the first days of the war, he had been hounding the engineers to perfect this machine, and at last it appears the German General Ludendorff is to credit the tank for the defeat of his armies. He complains that they completely unnerved and caused panic amongst his troops. Autumn 1917, American troops arrived to join the Allies.
The long arm of destiny has reached across the oceans and involved the entire life and manhood of the United States in a deadly struggle.
The British Commander Haig, together with General Pershing, American Commander-in-Chief, acknowledges Supreme Commander, the French Marshal Foch. At last, there was a unified command to bring the Great War to a victorious end. The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918. The First World War is over.
After the end of the World War, there was a deep conviction and almost universal hope that peace would reign in the world. President Wilson had made the conception of a League of Nations dominant in all minds.
Versailles, where a treaty of peace is to be signed. But the whole life energy of the greatest nations on earth had been poured out in anger and in slaughter. And over the proceedings in the Hall of Mirrors, there hovers a spirit of revenge.
This is a sad story of complicated idiocy. This is not peace. It is an armistice for 20 years.
Chartwell, a true place of peace, where the warrior statesman comes to live soon after. Chartwell, a refuge, a retreat, a place to work. He paints and coins a new painter's vocabulary. He calls this his bottlescape. But he paints other things too. In fact, he paints everything in sight. He was able to buy Chartwell with the proceeds of this book, a bestseller. To a visiting friend, he says, "All this is out of my pen." And here in Chartwell, he lives a tranquil life. But there is no tranquility in politics. Lloyd George's government falls. Elections again for Winston Churchill. And he, who has always appreciated the virtues of alcohol, is beaten by a prohibitionist. But then he just had appendicitis.
In the twinkling of an eye, I found myself without an office, without a seat, without a party, and without an appendix.
But 2 years later, under the new Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, Winston is back.
I was surprised, and the Conservative Party dumbfounded, when he invited me to become Chancellor of the Exchequer, the office which my father had once held.
Now 50 years old, he's believed to have reached the peak of his career. But events far from home are shaping his ultimate destiny. There are ominous stirrings abroad.
German people, with their ingrained love of massive and majestic authority, clung to Marshal Hindenburg.
Behind the veneer of a gaily dancing, happy and innocent Germany, a great void has opened.
Into that void strode a maniac of ferocious genius, the repository and expression of the most virulent hatreds that have ever corroded the human breast. Corporal Hitler. Nazis at last arrived on the scene from the depths of defeat and the dark and savage furies latent in the most ruthless race in Europe.
With the Great Depression comes a new government to Britain, from which the dynamic, the courageous, the meddlesome Winston Churchill is excluded. For 10 years now, he will wander in the wilderness, out of office, a lonely, frustrated figure pushed once more to the sidelines of history.
I lived mainly at Chartwell, with my happy family around me.
And friends from all over the world came to visit. Charlie Chaplin, Al Smith, Somerset Maugham, H.G. Wells.
I built with my own hands a large part of 2 cottages and extensive garden walls.
But in this quiet retreat, he receives information from the capitals of the world. Even in the wilderness, he is as well informed on the threatening European situation as any member of the cabinet. And meanwhile, he continues to paint the things about him he loves, including his new fish ponds.
I made all kinds of rockeries, waterworks, and a large swimming pool. Thus, I never had a dull or idle moment from morning to midnight, and dwelt in peace within my habitation.
And while the scene darkens in Europe and war clouds gather once again, he stands here and writes a monumental history of his ancestor and hero, the first Duke of Marlborough.
Writing a long and substantial book is like having a friend and companion at your side, to whom you can always turn for comfort and amusement, and whose society becomes more attractive as a new field of interest is lighted in the mind.
Churchill has need of comfort. At the far side of the world, the banked-up fires of war are flaring up again. (1931). Japanese guns in Manchuria. At Geneva, Japan withdraws from the League of Nations. Its delegation returns home. The machinery for keeping the peace is falling apart. In Africa, another dictator crushes another defenseless people. Mussolini's troops overrun Ethiopia. Haile Selassie appeals for help to the League of Nations, without result. And Churchill says,
"Unless we take warning in time, we may someday be the victims. We must build up defense forces of every kind."
but there are few who listen. England and France are in the grip of appeasement. Downing Street is on good terms with France's leading appeaser, Pierre Laval. Winston Churchill continues to raise his voice in warning.
We are a rich and easy prey. With our enormous metropolis here, the greatest target in the world, a kind of tremendous, fat, valuable cow tied up to attract the beast of prey. We must take effective measures while the time remains to ward off the danger.
The eyes and ears of the world are centered elsewhere, on an event recorded by an American newsreel.
King Edward VIII, the world's most famous bachelor, has often been a best man, but never a bridegroom. Today, the American press is filled with rumors of royal romance, of the possibility of King Edward marrying Mrs. Wallace Simpson, the former Baltimore belle. Yesterday, as a girl, she lived in Maryland in this quiet and humble Baltimore home. Tomorrow, she may dwell in Buckingham Palace. King Edward's romance holds the attention of the world, and in London, the drama of empire unfolds. Crowds like this surround Buckingham Palace to prove to the king that all the world loves a lover. Except perhaps Prime Minister Baldwin, the leader of the government's fight against the marriage. But with Winston Churchill rallying the friends of the king, the government faces opposition.
The king makes his decision. He renounces his throne for the woman he loves. Still out of office, Churchill broods on the gathering storm, his thoughts in somber contrast to his gay canvases.
I meditated constantly upon the European situation and the rearming of Germany. Britain must arm. We must oppose the Nazi regime with its prodigious armament so swiftly developing.
But there are few who listen.
I have watched this famous island descending the staircase which leads to a dark gulf. Hitler has torn up the treaties and garrisoned the Rhineland. Europe is approaching a climax. There will be an explosion and a catastrophe which no imagination can measure. How are we going to stop this war, which seems to be moving toward us in so many ways?
And still, there are very few who listen. Again, attention is focused elsewhere.
The solemn national act of allegiance to the new sovereign now filled all minds. Our island might have been 10,000 miles away from Europe.
Still, the voice in the wilderness will not be silenced.
We lie within a few minutes striking distance of the French, Dutch, and Belgian coast, and within a few hours striking distance of the great aerodromes of Central Europe. Is it prudent? Is it possible to turn our backs on Europe and ignore whatever may happen there?
And still, there are few who listen.
Remorseless hammers are descending night and day in Germany. And the most warlike and in many ways the most efficient people in Europe are becoming welded into a tremendous fighting machine. Germany fears no one.
Germany is ready.
Meanwhile, at home, our life flowed placidly downstream. Poor England, leading her free, careless life from day to day, wandering along a path which led to all she wanted to avoid. By all means, follow your paths of peace, but do not close your eyes to the fact that we are entering a corridor of deepening and darkening danger.
Fireworks in Berlin to celebrate Anschluss, Hitler's takeover of Austria.
Germany is led by a handful of triumphant desperados. The acceptance by the Western democracies of the German subjugation of Austria encouraged Hitler to pursue his designs against Czechoslovakia. Prime Minister Chamberlain was convinced of a lasting peace.
This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
Peace in our time. But Czechoslovakia recedes into the darkness of the German Reich.
Our loyal, brave people should know the truth. They should know that we have sustained a defeat without a war.
Next comes Poland on Hitler's list. Here at last, the Chamberlain government stands firm. If Hitler invades Poland, Britain and France will come to a defense and declare war on Germany.
Now is the end of submission. Here is decision at last, taken at the worst possible moment.
And at last, the people begin to hear his voice crying from the wilderness. No longer lulled by Downing Street reassurances, the loyal, brave people quietly prepare for the worst. Moscow, August 1939. Nazi Germany and Communist Russia sign a non-aggression pact. Both dictatorships agreed not to war against one another. Now, secure in the east, Hitler is free to attack. The sinister news of the pact breaks upon the world like an explosion.
Whatever emotions the British government may have experienced, fear was not among them. Nothing could now delay or divert the conflict.
September 1st, 1939. The Nazis smash across the frontiers of Poland. World War II begins. The war foretold by Churchill for so many years.
I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
10 years Churchill has been in the political wilderness. Now his bitter prophecies have come true. He can no longer be ignored. He is brought back to his old post, First Lord of the Admiralty, 64 years old. His days of glory are now to begin.
So it was that I came again to the room I had quitted in pain and sorrow almost a quarter of a century before. First Lord of the Admiralty again. No one had been over the same terrible course twice with such an interval between. I feel like one who treads alone some banquet hall deserted, whose lights are fled, whose garlands dead, and all but he departed. Once again, we must fight for life and honor against all the might and fury of the valiant, disciplined, and ruthless German race. Once again, so be it.
From the radio mast at the Admiralty, a message is flashed to his beloved fleet. Winston is back. Winston is back. "70 feet underground, close to 10 Downing Street, a unique command post waiting to spring into action, the nerve center of the war effort. The armed forces, the government, all are represented here, including the king, his dispatch box. Time ticks away and there's nothing to report. For this is the Twilight War, the phony war. The maps of the world indicate no battles yet, save one, swift and savage. Blitzkrieg on Poland.
The resistance of Warsaw, largely arising from the surge of its citizens, was magnificent and forlorn. After many days of bombardment, the Warsaw radio ceased to play the national anthem. Thus, in 1 month, all was over, and a nation of 35 millions fell into the merciless grip of those who sought not only conquest, but enslavement and, indeed, extinction.
The secret clauses of the Nazi-Soviet pact are suddenly exposed to the world. And the Russians, too, fall upon their mortally wounded neighbor. The Nazis and the communists tear Poland apart and divide it between them. In France, strange, dreamlike days. A country at war, but no action. The Rhine bridges are down, and the army is snug in its Maginot Line. The British expeditionary forces have arrived, but still no action. Along the Belgian frontier, the old forts are manned. And the Royal Air Force flies, but only on missions of psychological warfare, dropping propaganda leaflets upon the silent enemy. But at sea, there is no phony war. On the very first day, Britain is locked in a savage struggle to keep her lifelines open.
Dominating all our power to carry on the war, or even keep ourselves alive, they are mastery of the ocean routes and the free approach and entry to our ports. How much would the U-boat warfare reduce our imports and shipping? Would it ever reach the point where our life would be destroyed?
The German pocket battleship, the Graf Spee, is hunted down by the Royal Navy and blows herself up off South America.
The brilliant sea fight, which Admiral Harwood conceived, takes its place in our naval annals. And I may add that in the dark, cold winter, it warms the cockles of the British heart.
Now Germany attacks again. Denmark and Norway are quickly trapped in the Nazi war machine. Hurriedly, the British and French assemble troops and a ramshackle campaign is launched against the Germans in Norway. But as Churchill says, we were too late. The enemy drove us back and our finest troops were baffled by the vigor, enterprise, and training of Hitler's young men. disastrous news from Norway sweeps like a tidal wave upon the people at home. Too little, too late. Confidence is lost in the war government. Quoting Cromwell, a pugnacious member in the House of Commons, addresses Chamberlain. "You have sat too long here for any good you have been doing. Depart, I say, and let's have done with you. In the name of God, go." And still on May the 9th, all is tranquil in the Western Front.
The morning of the 10th of May dawned. The Germans struck their long-awaited blow. Now, at last, the slowly gathered, long-pent-up fury of the storm broke upon us. 4 or 5 millions of men met each other in the first shock of the most merciless of all the wars of which record has been kept.
That same day, at last, in their desperate need, the British people call upon Winston Churchill to lead them. He is summoned to Buckingham Palace.
It only takes 2 minutes to drive there from the Admiralty along the Mall. I was conscious of a profound sense of relief. I felt as if I were walking with destiny, and that all my past life had been but a preparation for this hour and for this trial. I speak to you for the first time as Prime Minister in a solemn hour for the life of our country, of our empire, of our allies, and above all, of the cause of freedom. A tremendous battle is raging in France and Flanders. The Germans, by a remarkable combination of air bombing and heavily armored tanks, have broken...
The retreating Allied forces stand with their backs to the sea, trapped, facing an enemy poised for the kill.
On the day I ordered the retreat from Dunkirk, there was a short service in Westminster Abbey. A white glow, overpowering, sublime, ran through our island from end to end. The English are loath to expose their feelings, but I could feel the pent-up, passionate emotion, and also the fear, not of death or wounds, but of defeat and the final ruin of Britain.
Boats of all kinds put out for Dunkirk to rescue the beloved army.
In the midst of our defeat, glory came to the island people. The tale of the Dunkirk beaches will shine in whatever records are preserved of our affairs. You ask, what is our policy? I will say, it is to wage war by sea, land, and air against a monstrous tyranny never surpassed in the dark, lamentable catalogue of human crime. That is our policy. You ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word: victory. Victory at all costs. Victory in spite of all terror. Victory, however long and hard the road may be. For without victory, there is no survival. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
And now Italy attacks France.
Mussolini could not resist the temptation of stabbing prostrate France and what he thought was helpless Britain in the back. The hyena in his nature broke all bounds of decency and even common sense.
And France totters toward defeat.
The news from France is very bad, and I grieve for the gallant French people who have fallen into this terrible misfortune. Nothing will alter our feelings toward them, or our faith that the genius of France will rise again. And I proclaim my faith that some of us will once again rejoice in her greatness and in her glory, and once again stand forward as the champion of the freedom and rights of man.
June 21st. France is made to surrender to Hitler in the same railway carriage where Germany had surrendered to the Allies 22 years before. Hitler receives a telegram from her ally. The Soviet Union sends you the warmest congratulations on the splendid success of the German armed forces. Signed, Molotov.
Français, c'est moi, Churchill, qui vous parle. Sleep to gather strength for the morning. For the morning will come. Brightly will it shine on the brave and true. Kindly upon all who suffer for the cause. Glorious upon the tombs of heroes. Thus will shine the dawn. Vive la France! The Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Let us, therefore, brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
The British Air Force, desperately outnumbered, inflicts heavy losses on the enemy.
40 or 50 squadrons of British fighter aircraft in the Battle of Britain broke the teeth of the German air fleet at odds of 7 or 8 to 1. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.
The fury of the enemy rages overhead. Fierce nightly bombings force a reluctant and grumbling Prime Minister to sleep and work underground. But weekends, the inexhaustible Churchill spends at checkers, the country retreat of Britain's prime ministers. But for him, Chequers is no retreat. Military men, scientists, secretaries work day and night without respite.
I always went to bed at least for an hour in the afternoon. I commended to others in order to get the last scrap out of the human structure.
He travels from one end of Britain to the other to gauge for himself the condition of the people and the country. Nothing is overlooked.
We are waiting for the long-promised invasion. So are the fishes. There may be raids by parachute troops and attempted descents by airborne soldiers. We ought to be able to give these gentry a warm reception. We await undismayed the impending assault. Perhaps it will come tonight. Perhaps it will come next week. Perhaps it will never come. We seek to beat the life and soul out of Hitler and Hitlerism. That alone. That all the time. That to the end.
Richard the Lionheart looks down on the shattered House of Commons. But the members of Parliament continue to meet.
When one chamber was damaged, they moved to another. It will always add to the renown of the British Parliament that its members continue to discharge their duties through all this period. Even the threat of annihilation did not daunt our members. It was a proud thought that democracy could endure, surmount, and survive all trials.
From everywhere, the news is bad. Retreat in the east, failure in Libya, a son killed in Crete, or a mother and her children buried in a mass grave in Coventry.
This is no war of chieftains or of princes, of dynasties or of national ambition. It is a war of peoples and of causes. This is a war of the unknown warriors. Let all strive without failing in faith or in duty. I have never promised anything but blood, tears, toil, and sweat.
President Roosevelt sends his assistant Harry Hopkins to offer what help he can.
The Lend-Lease Bill must be regarded without question as the most unsordid act in the whole of recorded history.
With Britain's life hanging in the balance, President Roosevelt sends a note to the Prime Minister.
In it, he wrote out a verse in his own handwriting from Longfellow, which he said applies to you people as it does to us. Here is the verse. Sail on, O ship of state. Sail on, O Union, strong and great. Humanity with all its fears, with all the hopes of future years, is hanging breathless on thy fate. Here is the answer which I shall give to President Roosevelt. Put your confidence in us. Give us your faith and your blessing. We shall not fail or falter. We shall not weaken or tire. Give us the tools, and we will finish the job.
Now it is Sunday morning, June 22nd. Churchill receives startling news.
At 4 o'clock this morning, Hitler attacked and invaded Russia. So now this bloodthirsty gutter snipe must launch his mechanized armies upon new fields of slaughter, pillage, and devastation. I see advancing upon all this, in hideous onslaught, the Nazi war machine, with its clanking, heel-clicking, dandified Prussian officers, its crafty expert agents, fresh from the cowing and tying down of a dozen countries. I see also The deadly, drilled, docile, brutish masses of the Hun soldiery plodding on like a swarm of crawling locusts. I see the German bombers and fighters in the sky, still smarting from many a British whipping, but delighted to find what they believe is an easier and safer prey. We are resolved to destroy Hitler and every vestige of the Nazi regime. From this, nothing will turn us. Nothing. We shall fight him by land. We shall fight him by sea. We shall fight him in the air, until, with God's help, we have rid the earth of his shadow.
In July 1941, Churchill sails for a meeting, a secret meeting of great importance. He's aboard Britain's newest battleship, traveling at high speed, making zigzags and wide diversions to avoid German U-boats. With him are top military and civilian advisors. His old friend Lord Beaverbrook, now Minister for Aircraft Production. During the voyage, the film Lady Hamilton is shown by the Prime Minister to his colleagues. Churchill, seeing it for the 4th time, is still deeply moved.
Gentlemen, I thought this film would interest you, showing great events similar to those in which you have been taking part. August the 9th, to His Majesty the King. With humble duty, I have arrived safely, and I am visiting the President this morning. I chose the hymn myself. Every word seemed to stir the heart. It was a great hour to live. Nearly half of those who sang were soon to die.
In that quiet bay of Newfoundland, there is drawn up a reaffirmation of faith, the Atlantic Charter.
We stand, all of us, upon the watchtowers of history. We are fighting to save the whole world from the pestilence of Nazi tyranny and in defense of all that is most sacred to man. It is a war to establish and revive the stature of man.
Just 4 months later, Chequers, on a Sunday night, the Prime Minister hears vague but disturbing news on the radio and immediately puts in a call to Washington.
In 2 or 3 minutes, Mr. Roosevelt came through. Mr. President, what's this I hear about Japan? It's quite true, he replied. We're all in the same boat now.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. With confidence in our armed forces with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
The United States was in the war up to the neck and to the death. I knew that it was easier to infuriate the Americans than to cow them.
Churchill is in Washington now, addressing a joint session of Congress.
The fact that my American forebears have for so many generations played their part in the life of the United States, and that here I am, an Englishman, welcomed in your midst, makes this experience one of the most moving and thrilling in my life, which is already long and has not been entirely uneventful. I wish indeed that my mother, whose memory I cherish across the veil of years, could have been here to see. By the way, I cannot help reflecting that if my father had been American and my mother British, instead of the other way round, I might have got here on my own. It is not given to us to peer into the mysteries of the future. Still, I avow my hope and faith, sure and inviolate, that in the days to come, the British and American peoples will, for their own safety and for the good of all, walk together in majesty, in justice, and in peace.
For part of the homeward flight, one of the first of all flying enthusiasts takes over the controls. He's flying into a storm of criticism. The campaign in North Africa is going badly. Tobruk has fallen.
In the desert, a new figure had sprung up upon the world stage. A German warrior, General Rommel, the Desert Fox, a splendid military gambler. His ardor and daring inflicted grievous disasters upon us.
Now Churchill's leadership is under the most bitter attack. He faces and outfaces political disaster. He tells the House of Commons that it's because things have gone badly, and worse is to come, that he demands a vote of confidence.
I ask no favors. I am your servant, and you have the right to dismiss me if you please.
Will he once again be cast aside? Britain and the world wait and wonder. The old warrior, he's 67 now, receives an overwhelming vote of confidence. His leadership again secured, Churchill flies to Egypt to judge the situation for himself.
I visited the Alamein positions. This desert warfare has to be seen to be believed. I became the man on the spot. Instead of sitting at home and waiting for the news from the front, I could send it myself. This was exhilarating. Luncheon was provided in a wire-netted cube, full of flies and important military personages. This turned out to be a gay occasion in the midst of care. A real oasis in a very large desert.
El Alamein, a small desert railway station in Egypt. It's the starting point for a vast undertaking. Now Montgomery commands the 8th Army, Desert Rats.
may explain Tobruk. The Eighth Army has done better. It has avenged it at Alamein. This Battle of Egypt, so important, was designed and timed as a prelude to this momentous enterprise under United States command at the western end of the Mediterranean.
Operation Torch, the invasion of North Africa, November 1942. Allied troops landed Casablanca, Oran, and Algiers. German forces under Rommel are caught between the Eighth Army moving from the east and the invasion forces from the west.
We have victory, a remarkable and definite victory. A bright gleam has caught the helmets of our soldiers and warmed and cheered all our hearts. Rommel's army has been defeated. It has been routed. It has been very largely destroyed as a fighting force. Now, this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is perhaps the end of the beginning.
At Stalingrad, the Germans are trapped by Russia's most ancient ally.
Then Hitler made his grand blunder. He forgot about the winter. There is a winter, you know, in Russia. For a good many months, the temperature is apt to fall very low. There is snow, there is frost, and all that. Hitler forgot about this Russian winter. He must have been very loosely educated. We all heard about it at school, but he forgot it. I have never made such a bad mistake as that.
The vaunted invincible Nazi armies disintegrate. General von Paulus surrenders. El Alamein and Stalingrad, the hinge of fate. In January 1943, the Prime Minister is in Casablanca to meet the American president. With their chiefs of staff, they plan the future conduct of the war, the invasion of Sicily and Italy, the soft underbelly of the Axis. Sicily, 1943. The Allies launch the greatest amphibious operation so far attempted in history.
Everyone was very proud and delighted. There is no doubt that people like winning very much.
He had never meant the armies to be stuck in North Africa. It should be a springboard, he says, not a sofa. With Anthony Eden, he spreads good cheer among the troops and congratulates the victorious warriors. He makes a speech in Carthage.
After the war, when a man is asked what he did, it will be quite sufficient for him to say, I marched and fought with the Desert Army. And when history is written, your feats will gleam and glow long after we who are gathered here have passed away.
Sicily was won. Now, the invasion of Italy. 4 years to the day after Churchill's return to office, Allied troops are back on the continent. Naples is liberated. Mussolini is in prison. And the unrelenting hunter is close on Hitler's tracks. The red-hot rake of war is drawn up the back of Italy. The Allies push toward Rome. The Germans rescue Mussolini.
This whipped jackal, Mussolini, who to save his own skin had made all Italy a vassal state of Hitler's empire, comes frisking up at the side of the German tiger. When we come to the final reckoning, this absurd impostor will be abandoned to public justice and universal scorn.
In the air, the fight is carried to the heart of Germany. November the 30th, 1943, he celebrates his birthday in Tehran. The first summit meeting. Stalin is told by Churchill and Roosevelt that the great invasion of France is not far off. Stalin's reaction to this momentous news is not recorded. Far away in the Pacific, the enigma of Japan is rapidly being solved by the Allied navies. Churchill is back in England as busy as ever. Directives are pouring out from the Prime Minister's office. No detail is overlooked.
Prime Minister to Minister of Food. Try to cut out petty annoyances, whether in the hotels, the little shops, or the lives of ordinary people. The great work of rationing in this country, which has given so much confidence and absence of class feeling, should not be prejudiced by little trumpery regulations. Prime Minister to Colonial Secretary. The establishment of the apes on Gibraltar should be 24. Every effort should be made to reach this number as soon as possible and maintain it thereafter. Prime Minister to Home Secretary. What is the truth of the tales I hear about the plan for leading captured generals to visit some of our education centers? I should be opposed to any of this nonsense.
The Atlantic Wall, the most formidable bulwark in the history of warfare. Behind these massive coastal fortifications are 500,000 German soldiers under Field Marshal Rommel, the Desert Fox, unhappy in his new role as defender. Behind this shield of fire and concrete, of barbed wire guns and death traps, the conquered peoples of Europe lay prostrate. But deliverance is near.
Prime Minister to Chief of Combined Operations. Mulberry harbors must float up and down with the tide. The anchor problem must be mastered. Don't argue the matter. The difficulties will argue for themselves. The underwater pipeline for fuel, Pluto. This idea and many others aroused my personal attention, and when it seemed necessary, my intervention.
Weird and wonderful devices, instruments with which to attack and pierce the Atlantic Wall.
Do not despair, brave Norwegians. Your land will be cleansed. Be sure of yourselves, Czechs. Your independence will be restored. Poles, the heroism of your people standing up to cruel oppressors shall not be forgotten. Lift up your heads, gallant Frenchmen, tough, stout-hearted Dutch, Belgians, Luxembourgers, tormented, mishandled, shamefully cast away people of Yugoslavia, glorious Greece, yield not an inch. Mighty forces are arming on your behalf. Have faith, have hope. Deliverance is sure.
The invasion of France is a few days off. Mrs. Churchill and her husband are calm and confident.
The hour of our greatest effort and action is approaching. When the signal is given, the whole circle of avenging nations will hurl themselves upon the foe and batter out the life of the cruelest tyranny which has ever sought to bar the progress of mankind.
D-Day, June the 6th. The Atlantic Wall is breached. D-Day +5, Churchill steps once again upon the soil of France. Hitler, in desperation, now launches against London his secret weapon, the flying bomb. The doodle bug, the buzz bomb, the V1. Makes a peculiar noise as it flies. Then, sudden silence. And a few seconds to death.
Blind, impersonal nature of the missile made the individual on the ground feel helpless. The man going home in the evening never knew what he would find. The fortitude of the people for the second time in this war gave the words Greater London a prouder meaning.
In the south of France, the Allies are landing. There's little resistance. But in the north, in Normandy, the battle is bloody and fierce. Finally, German lines are ripped apart. And at this signal, the underground forces rise against the Nazi conquerors and their collaborators, the Vichy French. Churchill had always wanted Paris to be liberated by the French army rather than by Americans or British. 4 years earlier, he had said,
"When that day dawns, as dawn it will, the soul of France will turn with comprehension and with kindness to those Frenchmen and Frenchwomen, wherever they may be, who in the darkest hour did not despair of the Republic."
And later, a happy Churchill comes himself to the City of Light.
I always had a feeling of unity with the people of Paris and this immortal city. Now, most of France is free, but there are other battles to win.
Other battles to win. And a freezing winter to face. In Athens, the birthplace of democracy, Churchill spends the last Christmas of the war. German tyranny has been crushed, but communist guerrillas have come out into the open, and a civil war begins.
Russian imperialism and the communist creed had become a mortal danger. I took direct control. I ordered British troops to intervene and fire upon the treacherous aggressors. Democracy is not based on violence or terrorism. Democracy is no harlot to be picked up in the street by a man with a Tommy gun. Democracy is based on reason, fair play, and freedom, on respecting the rights of other people.
He pins his hopes for a quick settlement on Archbishop Damaskinos, and in a few weeks there's a new government to lead the Greek people. The big three meet again at Yalta. President Roosevelt can only stay 5 or 6 days. With plans for the United Nations at stake, Churchill is disturbed.
I don't see any way of realizing our hopes of world organization in 5 or 6 days. Even the Almighty took 7.
His anxiety increases, and he's aware, too, that Roosevelt is ill.
His face had a transparency, an air of purification. I felt that he had a slender contact with life.
The Allies chase the German army across the Siegfried Line. A few days later, Churchill is with the troops. Hard on Hitler's tracks, he crosses Germany's ancient moat, the Rhine. Above his head, there hangs the trail of a V2. It carries with it Germany's last desperate hope.
The Nazi beast is cornered. Its destruction is inevitable.
Allied troops are breaking through from the west. Prisoners of war are released. By agreement among the Allies, the Russians take Berlin.
They gained the strategic and political advantage of being in the heart of Europe. This struck a knell in my heart.
And now, with the surrender of Germany so close, there comes tragic news on the little radio at Chequers. No longer would he hear that familiar voice.
This duty we owe, not to ourselves alone, but to the many dead who died to gain our freedom for us, to make the world a place where freedom can live and grow into the ages.
He was the greatest American friend that Britain ever found, and the foremost champion of freedom and justice who has ever stretched strong hands across the ocean.
May 1945. The bulk of the German forces capitulate to Montgomery as unconditional surrender brings fighting to a halt on all European fronts. But freedom comes too late at Belsen, at Dachau, at Auschwitz. The collectors of gold from teeth, the makers of lampshades from human skin, brazenly they pretend that nothing has happened. The exterminators who had nothing to do with it. The generals who had nothing to do with it.
The German army once again prove the truth of the saying, the Hun is always either at your throat or at your feet.
The mighty warriors await their squalid ends, or have already met it. Himmler, a suicide. Mussolini, strung up on a meat hook in Milan.
It will ever be to the glory of this island and its empire that we stood alone for one whole year of mortal peril and gained the time for the good cause to arm, to organize, and slowly bring the conjoined, united, irresistible forces of outraged civilization to bear upon the criminal. That is our greatest glory. I have never accepted what many people have kindly said, namely, that I inspired the nation. Their will was resolute and remorseless, and it proved unconquerable. It was the nation and the race dwelling around the globe that had the lion's heart. I had the luck to be called upon to give the roar.
After the surrender of Germany, the foundations of British national unity upon which the wartime government had stood so firmly collapsed. Churchill is caught in the turmoil of a general election. Concerned with the fate of the post-war world, he is called for a meeting of the heads of state. And for the conference at Potsdam, there steps ashore in Europe an ex-soldier of the First World War, Harry Truman. Before the conference begins, Churchill is taken on a tour of Berlin.
We entered the Chancellery and walked through its shattered galleries and halls. We saw the bunker in which Hitler and his mistress had committed suicide, and the place where his body had been burned. I had tracked the Nazi beast to his lair.
In Potsdam, the new American president brings news of the atomic bomb soon to end the war in the Pacific. And while the conference continues, the British Prime Minister flies home 1 day before the elections.
I went to bed in the belief that the people would wish me to continue my work. However, just before dawn, I woke suddenly with a sharp stab of almost physical pain, the conviction that we were beaten. By noon, it was clear that the socialists would have a majority. My wife said, "It may well be a blessing in disguise." I replied, "At the moment, it seems quite effectively disguised."
Once again, Winston Churchill is banished. The new Prime Minister, Clement Attlee, sits in his place in Potsdam. The first years of peace, the years of Churchill's banishment, he fills with mighty labors, finishing 2 monumental histories, a total of 10 volumes, the Second World War and the history of the English-speaking peoples. And now, the voice in the wilderness speaks again new warnings to a world divided, as he puts it, by an iron curtain.
From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent.
Then, 6 years after what had seemed his last defeat, 52 years after his first political campaign, once again, Winston Churchill is Prime Minister of England, aged 76. From his sovereign, he receives the highest honor in the land, the Order of the Garter. Now he is Sir Winston. The first Sir Winston had been the father of his childhood hero, the Duke of Marlborough. Lady Churchill in Stockholm, in the name of her husband, accepts for him the Nobel Prize for Literature. The citation reads, "He always stood forth as the defender of eternal human values." (1955). 80 years old. He says farewell to his queen. Winston Churchill ends his last term of office. He is the first man to be made an honorary citizen of the United States. President Kennedy paid tribute.
In the dark days and darker nights, when England stood alone, and most men, save Englishmen, despaired of England's life, he mobilized the English language and sent it into battle. A child of the House of Commons, he became its father. No statement or proclamation can enrich its name now. The name Sir Winston Churchill is already legend.
Winston Churchill, friend and leader. Winston Churchill, father and husband. Winston Churchill, writer, master of history and biography. His works printed in every language known throughout the world. Winston Churchill, painter.
I must say I like bright colors. When I get to heaven, I mean to spend a considerable portion of my first 1,000,000 years in painting. And so, get to the bottom of the subject. Then I shall require a still gayer palette than I get here below. There will be a whole range of wonderful new colors which will delight the celestial eye.
Winston Churchill, inheritor of history, recorder of history, maker of history.
What is the use of living if it be not to make this world a better place for those who will live in it after we are gone?